Howdy folks, my name is Evan and welcome to Drinking Horn. I am the mass purveyor of chaos around here, and if you've clicked on this video, that means you're interested in learning to make mead at home. If you're looking for a complete list of instructions for how to go about doing that as we walk through our video, check out the description in the link below. Howdy everyone, my name's Evan and I'm with Drinking Horn Meadery here, and
I'm Nick.
He's just Nick.
Yeah,
just Nick
fine.
Today. Don't look it up. We're gonna be making a batch of mead. You're gonna be making a batch of mead.
Yeah, and hopefully you'll be teaching me how to make a batch.
We're hoping. That's what we're hoping.
A match of mead or a batch of mead. One of the two.
Let's do batch of mead this time.
Okay.
Next video we'll do a match of mead.
Yeah. Okay, so where do we start? Evan from Drinking Horn Meadery.
We start with 5 gallons of water.
5 gallons of water.
All right. Team lift, always safety first.
Oh.
All with the spine.
I thought it was third. Crap. Okay. Lift with the back.
1, 2.
Skip a few. 5 gallons of. Ooh, it's warm.
It is warm. So we want the water to be warm enough, not boiling, but we want it to be warm enough that it basically makes it easier for the honey to mix around in there. Because honey.
Oh, we're gonna put the honey in the water.
Honey goes in the water.
What is mead?
Well, that's a good place to start. That's a good place to start.
Okay.
So, mead is a beverage that is fermented from honey. Just like grapes are fermented into wine, grain is fermented into beer, honey is fermented into mead. It's a big category just like those other two. Very versatile drink. You can make coffee mead, you can make whiskey mead, you can make fruity mead, you can make session mead, you can make dry hopped mead, you can do anything. It's really fun.
If by you showing me how to make mead, you guys out there can make your own mead.
Make your own mead.
Nice, sweet. All right, let's get with it.
So, what we have here, we want to make sure our water, like I said, is nice and warm so that it can go ahead and melt our honey in. So,
You said how hot? How warm?
I like it to be about 120 degrees where
Okay.
we're sitting right here right now, right before we put the honey into it, because
Okay.
the honey's relatively cold. It's raw honey, and so it's not ever heated or boiled or anything like that. I don't recommend ever boiling your honey. You kill all the good properties in it if you do that.
Okay.
All the things that make honey antiseptic, antibiotic, anti-everything else are preserved in raw honey, but you boil it and you cook all that stuff out.
Step number 1,
Step.
don't boil your honey, or anti-step number 1.
Anti-step. So you're gonna pour that guy in there.
Okay, this is raw honey.
That is raw honey.
If you guys want to see Evan explain what the differences are between raw honey and other honey, check out one of his videos on YouTube.
That's right.
And subscribe and get all sorts of cool stuff. So just a little plug there for, it's really neat. There's like this cap on it. So
Yeah, it's fun stuff.
glove up.
It's always good to glove up. Once you glove, these gloves aren't necessarily clean, right? They just came out of a box. God only knows where I had put that box before. So this right here is a bucket of Star San. Sterility is super important in the way that we're going to show you how to do this, because we're not using any sort of chemicals, we're not putting any preservatives in this, and so we are relying on our own sterility to make sure that we don't have any infections in our fermentation. Fermentation is kind of a funny thing because it really is just controlled degradation.
Okay. Controlled chaos. Controlled degradation.
It is.
All right.
It is.
So keep it sterile.
Keep it sterile. So I like to just dip my little flesh mitts in there, get a little on us. It just helps keep them clean. So it's Star San is what that is.
Star San.
And it's an acid-based sterilizer.
Yeah.
It smells a little heavy.
Food grade.
Food grade, yep.
It's basically, it's an ingredient that's also in soda, like in Diet Coke.
Yeah,
So.
same sort of thing. So that way when we use that, we don't have to worry about, washing it back off of our hands or anything like that, because you can eat it. I would lick my gloves to prove the point, but then I'd have to clean them again.
All right.
So I kind of pick that bucket up, dump it on down in, and then we'll use a little spatula that we're also sterilize everything. And oh yeah, look at it go. That's beautiful. And you can see this is,
cool.
It's still got some wax chunks in there.
Yeah,
and,
I think I
and
saw a
some
little
few
piece of
other
a bee.
parts. Yeah, there's probably some pieces of bee in there too. All good for fermentation.
All right. Is this a good enough pace?
That's perfect, yep. Because what we'll end up doing is after you dump all that in there, we'll give it a good scrapey scrape, and then we're gonna blend it with that power tool down there.
I was wondering what that was for.
It's just for some blending.
Right,
And it
let's
also
go,
helps whip in oxygen. Oxygen is so important in fermentation.
All right, let's go fast motion here. All right, so we've put in how much honey to 5 gallons of water?
17 pounds of honey.
17 pounds of honey.
You know how many visits to a flower it takes to make a pound of honey, Nick?
I have no idea.
You know how many visits it takes you? 2 million.
2 million.
2 million visits from a bee to a flower to create a pound of honey.
Right, and that poor research assistant grad student was sitting there going 1, 2, 3.
Thank
4.
goodness for citizen science.
Yeah. All right, so what's the next step?
I think the first thing that we'll do right here is we'll go ahead and blend it. So if you were looking over the top with us here, it separates. It separates really, really hard, right?
Yeah, it's
so
water on top of.
Let's grab that there drill.
As Tim the Toolman Taylor would say, time to get more power.
We need more power.
Now I'm guessing we should dip this into the star sand?
Dip it on in. And I once again, so this is a pretty basic tool. It looks like it's something that's more fancy than it is. I took, you know when you clean your carboys up and you've got that little wand that you use on the end of a drill with the cloth? All I did was I took that cloth thing off and put on a couple of cut up, basically, pieces of plastic.
Okay.
And that just kind of serves as our whip. And the whole idea with this is that you can still get it inside of one of those carboys. So it's gonna fan out once you start spinning.
Yeah.
So anyway, we just rubbed some star sand there along this guy. Just make sure it's clean.
All right, so we're gonna spin it to win it.
Clean and sterile are different, Nick.
Yes, they are.
It'll go once it gets in. It's fun. So this is part of why my wife is very happy that I don't make mead at home anymore.
Uh-oh, is this gonna get messy?
It can, but it should be all right.
All right, so am I ready to go?
You're ready to go.
All right, do I go into the honey?
Yeah, go into the honey. And so like we said, it separates into that layer, and then you just start, blend it. Oh. So what you're also doing right now is getting oxygen in there. More? I think that'll do it.
That'll do it? All right.
So you're trying to do two things. You're trying to blend up that honey all together, and so it's a nice homogeneous mixture going on there.
I think I did more than try.
Oh, you did. Look at it. And there's this nice foam that's going on top here. I love the foam. It's actually very tasty.
Cool.
Oh, it's very tasty.
So mixing it up.
Don't put your hands in there.
No.
So, and you're also trying to get oxygen into there.
Okay.
You really want to beat a bunch of oxygen. Oxygen, when you initially make a batch, is there so that your yeast can multiply and divide. As soon as they run out of oxygen, then they don't multiply and divide anymore. They start getting down to work on making alcohol.
That's right. Yeah, they go into anaerobic fermentation.
Boom.
Bling.
Google it if you don't know what it is. So something that's pretty unique about honey, Nick, is that it is entirely nitrogen and phosphorus poor. There's almost none in it whatsoever. So what we have here is essentially nitrogen and phosphorus.
Okay.
We use a Fermaid O as well as a diammonium phosphate for what we're gonna do today.
You made that word up.
I did. It's totally. You caught me. We're gonna mix this stuff and this other stuff into here.
Okay.
And it does things. So it's and you can really just kind of sprinkle it on top. And once again, these were all sterilized beforehand. So just make sure everybody knows.
Okay. And you weighed them out?
Yep, weighed them out.
So how much for a 5-gallon batch?
So you're gonna do, like I said, so honey is nutrient poor. And so you actually, to keep it going, we want this batch to get around 11% alcohol.
Okay.
And we're actually gonna need to feed it 2 more times to make sure that it gets there.
A staggered nutrient addition.
You got it. Some people online might find an SNA. That's what they're talking about, is a staggered nutrient addition.
Isn't that the funny sketch comedy thing?
SNA?
Oh, that's
Saturday
SNL.
Night. Oh wait, Saturday Night Live.
Not only in the beginning here, but then we're gonna add it 2 more times?
2 more times throughout fermentation. And so on the video we're gonna have a little map that's gonna show you where we're starting, where we're finishing, and where we're gonna add those. Because that's one of the most confusing parts about making mead, is this whole when do you feed it? Why do you need to feed it? Which I guess we covered the why, but now we're doing the when. So the next part of this is we'll just take our little spatula.
Right here?
Yep, you got it. Still got a whole bunch of honey on it.
Stir it up.
And just stir it up. And we're just mixing those nutrients in. We're all about homogeneous mixtures around here. We're all about homogeneous mixtures.
Cool.
So, like I said, this is a traditional. So we're not adding anything else but honey, yeast, and water.
Okay.
We're not gonna add any fruit. We're not gonna add any spices. We're not gonna carbonate it. We're not barrel aging it. This is just plain trad. So the recipe that I got this from was actually a monk's recipe that's probably about, I think, 600 or 700 years old.
Oh.
And they would talk about using the magic paddle.
Oh.
And what the magic paddle was an extremely gross paddle. that they would use for every single batch, and all it was their yeast carrier, basically. And so this paddle was ridden with yeast, and they would use it and stir it in, and that's what would inoculate their batch with yeast.
Gotcha.
Now we're gonna do a yeast pitch. So if you wanna know how to go about rehydrating a little bit of dehydrated yeast,
We're gonna pitch the yeast.
and we're gonna pitch it in.
All
If you wanna see how to do it, go further down on the YouTube page.
Oh yeah, check out the yeast rehydration video on Drinking Horn Meadery's YouTube video to see us do that.
And here it is.
Voila, it's like taking it out of the oven of a cooking show. Bling!
So the key now here, after you've gotten it, is you want the temperature of this, which is called, when you just mix honey and yeast, or honey and water together, it's called must.
Must.
And this is our starter that we already talked about. And so what we're gonna do is we're going to mix yeast into the starter. And you want those temperatures to be within about 3 degrees of each other.
Oh, okay.
Anything more than that variation, and you could temperature shock them. It's like, well, this doesn't apply to you because you like jumping in freezing cold bodies of water.
I do.
But most people don't like temperature shock. And so that's what we're trying to do to the yeast, is keep them from being temperature shocked.
Okay. Well,
So-
I do not like it when I drive from here down to, like, say, Phoenix or Tucson. I get out of the car, I get that temperature
Right,
shock.
when you
So-
start it up here and it's 23 degrees, and
Yeah.
by the time you make it down there, it's 95.
All right, so this is good to go?
That is good to go. It's been pre-mixed. It's all ready to go. Our yeast are in there, happy, hopefully.
All right, boys and girls. Actually, neither. All right, asexual reproducing single-celled organisms. It's time to do the job. You've got a job to do in there. At the beginning, you're gonna find out there's great nutrients in there, oxygen to reproduce, make little tiny buds of yourself, make an army ready to go. But then after that, we're taking away all your oxygen, so.
Yeah. You're still going to function, but not as happily. Boom! We just made a culture.
What?
Right there.
Oh,
Do you know that yeast
pretty awesome.
are made from fungus? Or are a fungus, not made from. They are a fungus.
try that one again.
Hey, Nick.
Yeah.
Did you know that yeast come from fungus?
No.
Hey, Nick.
Hey, yeah.
Did you know that yeast are fungus?
They are fungus.
They are. It's pretty
Single-celled,
interesting.
multicellular.
Dude,
Wow. Okay, let's get back to this. So we pitch the yeast.
yeast is pitched.
All right.
So at this point, you have your yeast starter has been pitched in. You've mixed together honey and water. That is how we start mead. Oh yeah, the nutrients. Don't want to forget that. We mixed in our nutrients initially.
All right. So we've got our water, we've got our yeast, we've got our honey, we've got our nutrients all in there. What's the next step that you would want to do?
The next step that we want to do is we want to test where our sugar levels are at. So like I said, we were shooting for 24 on this one. We did the math. Sometimes the math isn't right. And once again, this guy has been entirely, entirely sterilized. So we're just gonna dump our whole piece of equipment in there.
What's this thing called?
This is a hydrometer. So there's different ways. So this was one of my early confusions. I don't know about you. The difference between a hydrometer and a refractometer, right? And so don't get a refractometer.
No.
Save your money, save your time, get a hydrometer.
Yeah.
Because this guy is very consistent, and it's what we all use, right? Like in the alcohol industry, this is what we use, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, hydrometer is.
They really trust our math.
Yeah, that refractometer just stays in the.
I think you got a good shot over there. If you want to drop that guy on in there. This is also a good way to tell if we blended enough too.
What were we aiming for?
We were shooting for 24 is what we were shooting. Oh my gosh, we nailed it.
Yeah.
So these are also temperature dependent too. So if you have a really, really hot batch, if you're one of the crazy people that boils their mead beforehand and then you go straight into trying to use this, you're gonna get a weird number out of it.
So do your hydrometer reading at as close to
I think it's 60?
room temperature.
Yeah, it's between 65, 70 degrees. Try to get to room temperature.
Cool.
Or at least just be consistent with the temperature that you measure it at.
There you go. Yeah.
So if you want to measure at 200,
That's good science.
always measure at 200. Consistency. And I love, like, even if you're not going to write, like even if you're not trying to really keep track of alcohol or anything like that, I really like to write down all of my numbers while I'm doing this. So I like to test it beforehand, and then I'll test it probably every 5 days or every 3 days initially, and then you can kind of let it space out. Because the problem with making a 5-gallon batch, you steal too much out of it to test it all the time, and you're gonna have a tiny batch by the time you finish. And so this, like we're starting, this is 7 gallons all put together right here. we will finish with probably about 4 to 4.5 gallons out of the 7-gallon batch.
Okay, that's still a good amount of mead.
It'll get the job done.
Okay, so we've tested it. We know that we have 24 Play-Doh on there, 24 bricks. And so we write that down. Now what are we doing?
So now the final step is we're gonna go ahead and just cap this puppy off now.
Okay.
So like I said, we'll probably, I mean, honestly, if you're uncomfortable, like if you're nervous about making a batch and it's your first time, try to not check it more than like every 3 days. I really wouldn't.
Okay.
Because it's every time you check it, you're increasing your chance of contaminating it.
Yeah.
Every time you check it, you're losing mead. Just sad.
Yes, yeah, you don't want to do that.
So don't check it too often. Try to listen to our advice and get a beautiful plan laid out.
Yeah. Don't check it.
So let me grab that lid.
Yep.
So our lid here, we went ahead, once again, sterilize everything. Don't ever set things down even without re-sterilizing them again. So we're just gonna get a little bit on that. Get a little hand sterilizer. You can never be too sterile, but you can totally not be sterile enough.
Unless you want kids.
Right, unless you want
then
kids.
you can be too sterile.
That's totally too sterile.
Don't drink too much Mountain Dew out there.
Yeah, we're looking at you, Oklahoma.
Oh man, to the heart. All right, so throwing the cap on.
Throwing our cap on.
And then if this is anything like making beer, we're also gonna stick in this little hole something called an airlock, I believe.
Absolutely.
Nice.
And so we have a little airlock, and the whole idea behind the airlock is that it just kind of keeps it.
Sorry. Hold on.
Got this. Got this.
King Kong. Okay.
So the whole idea behind an airlock is that this is going to allow CO2 to come up and out, but not allow oxygen or fruit flies or whatever to get in there.
Yeah, nothing in.
Everything is going to be going after your mead.
And it's going to be creating CO2. So this is going to, if you didn't have this, if this was a sealed container, it would just create a bunch of pressure. Yeah, and the lid would eventually pop off.
Yeah.
So you can let things out, let the CO2 out once fermentation starts.
Right.
So then that's a good indication that everything's going right when you start to see that bubbling.
Yeah, totally. You can use it as an indicator of fermentation. You can count bubbles per second, which will give you a relative idea of how much CO2 they're producing and kind of show you, if you have no bubbles in 10 seconds, like you're getting down to the end of fermentation or your batch stalled out. Totally. Airlock will go into that little hole right there. Bam, look at that.
All right, so we've got the airlock. We've got everything. We've got our tests done.
Yep. We've written all of our numbers down, I promise.
Yeah?
Yeah.
We cutscene to that.
Yeah.
And?
Now you let it sit.
All right. Makeup.
Powder me. Oh. Beautiful. Now we're ready.
All right, so we have now mixed the honey with the water.
Yes.
We have added the yeast to that, and that was called must, right?
Yep.
Added the yeast to the must. We pitched the yeast to the must.
Correct.
And then we fed it its first feeding.
That's right.
We topped it off, and we let it sit. We let it sit overnight, and we can already see, if you guys can see right here, of course you can.
Fermentation is occurring!
It is, yeah. Hey, it worked.
We didn't ruin it. Cool. We didn't ruin it.
Yes! We didn't ruin it yet.
True. There's a lot of time left still in the whole making of the mead process. There's lots of opportunities still for us to ruin it.
Okay, good. So can you explain exactly what we're seeing here just quickly with this airlock?
So what's happening, the yeast are in there, they're doing their thing, they're multiplying, they're dividing, and they're feeding on the sugar that's in there. And when they feed, just like us, they fart. And so this is CO2 that is produced by the yeast. And as you can see, we've got a nice airtight seal on this thing, and so it is burbling out little bits of CO2 as the yeast farted out.
Now that's a word I can get behind, burbling.
Burbling. It's science.
It is. Yeah, so that's great. So that's good news. Okay, so what's the next step?
So the next step now is you got 2 more feedings to do, because we break that whole feeding schedule up. Because if you put all your you can put all your nutrients in at the beginning and just dump in everything you need, but you're likely to get a little bit of off flavor from your nutrients because you might be putting in too much, you might be putting in too little, and then there's the other part about availability. If you dump everything in at the beginning, it's going to settle down to the bottom, and the yeast are not going to be able to get to that nitrogen and phosphorus that they need to continue this experiment going on here.
Gotcha.
So we want to keep it in the bucket until we get through all of our feedings. So like you said, we dropped that first feeding in already, and we got 2 more feedings to do, which like you just kind of break it up incrementally. For a 5-gallon batch, you're looking at like basically like 7 grams of your nitrogen source and like 8.5 grams of your phosphorus source. All will be detailed in this description.
That's right. Again, if you want to see more details on this and more a little bit step by step, check the link in the description. It'll go right to it. I'll even put a little quick feeding schedule right here for you to take a look at. But yeah, check out that link. So again, you said we keep it in here?
Keep it in here until you're done with your 3rd feeding. And the whole idea behind that is that the vessel that you put it into next, one of these guys, has an extremely small neck on it. Look at, you can't get into there. That's really, really hard.
Yeah.
So I like to keep it in here until we're through our 3rd feeding, and it's still gonna be murky, it's gonna be cloudy, it's still gonna be an active batch at that point, but we're gonna go ahead and move it into this guy while it's still murky as soon as you get through your 3rd feeding. You can basically, as soon as you mix that 3rd feeding into here, you can go ahead and put it on in. And the way I go about mixing the 2nd and 3rd feeding into this, you saw, the first one we put it in and we kind of blended it in. If you need to mix it, you can. I recommend trying to not agitate too much. A little bit of agitation is good because you're gonna release some more of that CO2, which can actually add flavors to it if you leave too much of it in there. But you just kind of shake it on top like some fish food. You just gotta feed the fish.
All right, so we'll take your recommendation. Be gentle,
gentle.
When the feeding. So pop this open, feed it. Now I'm interested.
And be careful of things like falling into there or
things falling into there.
Not you. I mean, you'll drink your way out of it. You'll be all right. But like flies or dust or dirt or hair, right? You want to minimize the things that you put into your batch.
Okay. Speaking of which, should we glove up right now?
We should glove up.
All right. So. While we're doing that, why don't you tell us what in the world that thing is? Oh, yeah, here. There you
Thanks,
go.
Nick. I appreciate it.
No problem. I'll put mine on the regular way. Can you?
I don't have that kind of magic.
I'm the magic one.
So,
can you explain to people how we're going to transfer it over?
Absolutely. So this is the process called racking. The term rack just means to move it from one vessel into another vessel.
Okay.
And so this guy isn't done yet, so we're not gonna actually move this one. But you would just stick this guy in. You're not too worried about sediment. You're not too worried about anything. You're really just moving it from one into the other. Put an airlock on top, call it good. What this is a racking siphon. This guy goes into your batch, bunk. And then you put this guy, and it's got this little gasket on the bottom. So you put that guy in, and then you use it to pump. And it'll get your siphon going, and then it'll start going into the next one. When you're doing the siphon, you want to make sure that the tank that you're siphoning out of is higher than the tank you're siphoning into. We're just using gravity.
Makes sense. When I used to siphon gas out of cars when I was younger,
you want your vessel down below the tank of the gas. Yeah, we're kidding.
I saw it in a movie once. But this isn't ready yet.
This is not ready yet. This still has probably another week until we would do this stage of it. It takes about 8 days to get through all of your feedings and everything.
Okay, that's good to know.
About 3 weeks to get through your fermentation entirely. And yeah, but what we do want to show people is like you would move it into the next thing. It's going to be all cloudy. And once you move it over, you're essentially not touching it a whole lot anymore. Once you move it into the carboy, it's time for patience. It's terrible. This is the worst part. So you're gonna let it sit in this carboy until it gets nice and clear. When it's done fermenting, all your sediment is gonna start going down to the bottom, and it's gonna create a big old sediment layer down at the bottom. Now,
what is that sediment?
That sediment is just mostly, it's not dead yeast. That's a lot of people think that the stuff at the bottom of their batch is dead yeast. Yeah. They're like in hibernation, basically, because they've already gone through all the sugar in there that they can. They are possibly hitting an alcohol barrier. So like different yeast can produce different levels of alcohol, and that's all like an osmotic gradient kind of thing. That's just like, all right, how much heat can you stand? You can stand a lot of, not much heat at all. See, I can stand a bit more heat. So I've got like a higher heat tolerance, and certain yeast will have a lower or higher alcohol tolerance. So that's why we recommended using the American ale yeast, is because it's gonna kick out like 11%, makes a nice mead. Once fermentation is done, you're gonna see your airlock is gonna stop doing this, and it's gonna settle down. And if you wanna help settle it down, basically, you can go ahead and stick it into your fridge.
Okay.
Get
Chill
it
them
cold.
out.
Chill them out.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, cold crash. You can Google it if you want. The big part of that is just stick it in your fridge and let it cool out and it'll crash down. Even freezer, I mean, ideally, if you can get it just below freezing is probably the best temperature for cold crash. What do you cold crash beer at?
We cold at freezing temperature.
At freezing,
Well,
yeah.
so alcohol is a lower freezing temperature. You know,
Yes.
32 degrees is water. So
Right,
we'll knock it down to like 32 degrees, like what would be freezing for water. But it's not going to freeze the alcohol.
Right, beer doesn't freeze at that point because
Yeah.
it just allows that change so that everything falls down to the bottom.
Yeah, and in these guys, you're able to do that directly. This one, actually, I can see the condensation on here.
This one's doing it right
So
now.
you're cold crashing it. Okay, so maybe my fridge isn't big enough. It'll still happen though, right?
It'll still happen. Even
Okay.
if you can't cold crash, it just takes more time.
Yeah.
It probably cuts out a month or something by being able to cold crash.
Okay.
So it does significantly help. And you'll know it's settled enough. This is the thing I read, the things I read. So when it's settled enough, you can read a newspaper from the far side of it.
Oh, cool. Okay.
That's the old
never heard of that.
old-timey version of telling when it's done. So just like the cooking shows, we already have one done.
Yeah. Pulling it out of the oven.
And you can see like there's a fair amount of clarity on this guy. You can pretty much see straight through it at this point.
Yeah.
You could read something on the other side
sure,
of that.
for sure.
So this actually is a batch that I made with Guy Fieri.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
So this batch is probably about 2 years old at this point,
Woo!
somewhere in that realm.
Aged mead.
Aged mead. That's time is your biggest friend with mead. If you make a batch and it comes out tasting like jet fuel, don't throw it out.
Oh, no.
Don't throw it out.
Okay.
Keep it, throw it back in your closet, let it sit for forever. Ooh, something that I did forget up until this point, I'm glad I'm thinking about it now, is temperature of fermentation. It can be pretty important. And I think what we found in the commercial industry of doing this is that what is more important than the specific temperature is just try to keep it from oscillating a whole bunch.
Yeah.
So like, insulate it if you need to. I'd try to not ever have anything ferment above, like when I was fermenting at home, like try to keep it below 75 degrees. So now we're gonna show everyone how to do a little bit of racking on here. We're gonna use, of course, we've got our bucket of Star Sand here, as always. Trusty little sterilizer going on. And so we just kind of gotta, you can see how the racking cane works.
Yeah.
Because you're literally just you end up pumping through and it ends up bringing fluid up. Oh, I'm making messes.
Yeah.
So, same thing, sterilizing everything, right? Sterilize on everywhere, get a little on your face, sterilize up your face. It's food grade, you'll be all right. And what we're gonna show everyone today, so this is a batch that would be finished fermenting, it's settled, it's clarified up, and the next thing that we're gonna do is a little bit of bottling. So we're gonna go ahead and
Just let
it's
that
nice to be in a place with a floor drain. I love it.
Yeah.
You can't do this at home, your wife will kill you. So let's go ahead and let's take this guy out of the way. They are not light.
Okay.
If you got a bad back, make little batches,
Yeah.
small batches. All sterilized up,
Yep.
all ready to go. Luckily for
Reheat.
us, we have
Couple bottles.
some pre-sterilized bottles
Oh, cool.
sitting right
Nice.
here.
Good deal.
We went ahead and skipped a couple of steps. All right, so we've got our bottles all lined up. Got our nice settled batch of mead here. So we just kind of pry this guy up out the top, and we will go ahead and gently drop this guy down in there. And you want to keep it up out of the sediment. When you drop this guy down in, you don't want it in the sediment. So like I kind of tend to center it in the batch and then kind of slowly move it downwards as we end up going through it.
You want this?
Yeah, you want to get that guy in there.
All right. Now, should I put it more towards the bottom or towards
I
the
like
top?
it towards the bottom personally. I
that's
tend
what
to
I thought.
think that if you put it towards the bottom, you're gonna get less disturbance in your mead. You still have that oxygen like we were talking about, like you still have a huge chance of introducing a ton of oxygen here. And by putting that at the bottom, you decrease that.
Okay.
And it's the same when we fill them. We're gonna fill them all but this much to the top because we wanna minimize that oxygen interaction in this batch.
Cool.
You can see we got a little foam going on in there. That's just the Star Sand. And if you can get that pump pretty quick so that you're not getting all the bubble in there, that is the most ideal situation.
Oh, look at that. Beautiful. Wow, that was awesome. All right. And then is there any way of stopping it or no?
We can pinch.
Okay. Should we add a little bit more?
As you pull it out, it'll empty out the rest of this hose into it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Perfect.
I don't know if it's perfect, but
Perfect enough. Mead is also relatively forgiving. I would say more so than beer or anything like that.
yeah, I would think so. Now seeing.
So you see what I did there was I just sterilized the very top of the lid before we seal it down, because once again, sterility is paramount.
I pinch.
He pinched it.
What is that from Finding Nemo? I pinch.
I pinch. Make booze with a friend. It's always easier.
Yeah.
Making booze by yourself is hard.
Beautiful batches of mead. Everybody loves to drink the mead.
So I think we mentioned, is there anything else that we need to kind of mention? Is there anywhere that you're confused on how the process works? That was a good save, man.
No.
Good save.
I don't think so. I think, basically just, the main thing I've gotten from this is a little bit of not to be scared. It's pretty simple.
It's pretty simple.
Compared to, say, making, beer.
I would say it's extremely simple compared to making beer.
Yeah, except for this part.
Except for this whole bottling
I'm
piece.
Almost going to knock it over. But yeah, so don't be scared. Go try it out. Fill them to the to the absolute top.
Right to the absolute top. So you always want to leave a tiny bit of headspace, because if you fill them all the way to the top and your mead starts to warm up a little bit, it explodes your bottle.
Okay, so what are we going to do with that? Oh, all right, that's what we're going to do with that.
Oh my gosh, that's actually pretty darn good mead.
Ooh, nice.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So was this traditional?
This is just a traditional. And so you can taste it. In this one, we used a mesquite.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So that's what you're tasting.
There's a little,
you can
almost
totally
bit of
taste
like
the mesquite.
Like smokiness.
Absolutely.
So by mesquite, you mean
Mesquite honey.
So the bees.
The bees were in an area where the mesquite trees were flowering.
Yeah.
For everyone that's not in the desert, I'm sorry. The desert has the most amazing varietals of honey in the entire world.
Because, well, the Sonora Desert.
Sonora
especially.
Desert, yeah. Because we have the mesquite, we have all the wildflower, we have cactus honey. We get all kinds of orange. Huh, okay, that didn't work out super well. Okay. Guess I gotta find another one of those now.
So Evan, just too many muscles.
I'm so strong.
Just broke the airlock.
Right. Yeah.
We'll get another.